Hello, hello. Happy Tuesday, everyone. Sorry about the lack of advance notification. I've been in quite a rush all day today. Very, very, very busy here. So I just printed off the last of what I needed to print off for today's show, and we are ready to get going here. I'm just going to give it a few moments because I didn't put out advance notification. So if you're watching on the replay, thank you so much for tuning in. I appreciate you. If you're watching from the bushes or from the forest, thank you so much for tuning in as well. So let me just grab my coffee. Fresh cup, fresh cup. Nothing like a fresh cup of coffee, right, guys? Fresh coffee. Hi, Tie-Dye One. Welcome in. Hi, Sonia. Welcome in. Margaret. We've got Cherry. Hello to you and Kitty. Hello, hello. Kim, Penn, all the mods. Hi, Dee Dee. Welcome in. Joyce, Aaron. If you're watching on the replay, just to give you a heads up, I say hello a lot. When people come to my live streams, it's almost like walking into my house, and I always like to greet people as they come in. I'm not able to get everyone, but I try to get as many as I can. So just a little bit of a forewarning there. Thank you all so much for making it tonight. I appreciate all of you guys. Hello, hello. All of you wonderful folks. Love the sweater. Thank you so much. I'll tell you where I got it from later on. It's a store-bought sweater. Obviously, I'm not well-versed in knitting to the degree where I would need to work all these colors. Happy Tuesday. Happy Tuesday. So this is not the Taco Tuesday. Taco Tuesday is next week. This time around, it is Let's Chat Stitches. Let's chat some stitches, guys. So what we're going to do today is we're going to do some more pattern reading. I'm going to walk you through some of these very basic beginner patterns. So if you're wanting to learn how to be able to read the actual diagrams, we're going to go through those today. Since we have a camera that's facing us the correct way, I didn't have to flip these diagrams. So I just printed them as they are. And I'm going to use a pointer. I'm going to walk you through the steps, but then also I'm going to show you some things that I like to look for when I look at diagrams, because as a crocheter, I try to look for the things that should be there, but they're not there. So I found some of those, and I'm going to show you what you should be looking for, and when you look at a diagram to know when something is missing. Okay. So thank you all once again for coming. This is teacher-student situation. So if that is of interest to you, I hope you enjoy this. You probably, well, many of you probably already know all of the things I'm about to cover today, but that's okay. I appreciate your company anyway. Thank you so much for being here. Hi, Adriana, Eugenia. Thank you so much. Hi, Dawn. Welcome in. And Diana V. Hello to you. Hi, Susan R. Welcome in. It is frigid outside. Listen, when I walked out of the house today, it was like walking into a meat locker. It was freezing. Like, I just felt like the air that was coming out of my mouth, I mean, it almost felt like the smoke that was coming out was turning into icicles. It was so cold. I went right back in the house. I double layered up, turned the car on, let it run to warm up before actually getting in. It was one of those mornings. Oh my. Okay, so let's do a little bit of a recap, guys. I like to start off Let's Chat Stitches with a recap from past weeks. I've shown pictures of stitches and things like that, just to help everybody understand what we're looking at when we look at these stitches. So again, hopefully this is of interest to you. Maybe there will be at least one little thing that you learn from in this particular Let's Chat Stitches. Thank you all for the warm wishes, right? We have to stay warm. It's very, very important to stay warm these days, especially when you live in the Northern Hemisphere, you know, and you've got that polar vortex. I'm in Delaware, for those of you guys who don't know, and while we may not get the brunt of it all, those who live out in the Midwest, I mean, they're always getting like the brunt of that polar vortex. And I got to tell you, My well wishes are to all of you guys over there. The Michiganders, those from Minnesota, the Great Lake region. Yeah, they get the whole brunt of it. And then we get it after them. Okay, so a couple of refreshers, guys. Let's start off with this one. Can anybody tell me what stitch that is? Hi, Sammy Joe. Welcome in. Hi, Linda. Okay, Aaron, thank you so much. Yes, yes, yes. Double crochet. And you guys can actually read my handwriting. Double crochet. Very good. When I last showed these very same cards, everything was backwards. So, all right. What about this one, guys? What is the letter T in crochet? Anybody know? We're going over a few basics before we get into some of these complex ones. Half double crochet, guys. All right. Let's get into some of the more complex ones. Can anyone tell me what stitch this is? This is a stitch. Any guessers? I know it's a little, we're jumping all over the place here. Okay, I see bobble, I see bullion, I see drop. Hi, Joyce, welcome in. Any other ideas on what this stitch could be, guys? 3 lines. I love it. No clue. I love that answer too. This is my first time. Oh my goodness. Hi, Sammy Jazz. Welcome in. Okay, so this is the bullion stitch. So in the diagram, when you see this, this is the bullion stitch. Forgive the drawing. You know, sometimes the Sharpies seep through the page. Okay, here's another one. Ready? What's that with the little swoop at the bottom? That's a very specific. It's very specific. Hi, Jackson, Shay, and Dawn. Welcome in. Welcome in. Let's see. We've got double front loop, double crochet in the loop below. Good. All guesses are good guesses, guys. Front loop only. Okay, so first, when we look at a stitch like this, we have to look at the body of the stitch. So the body of the stitch is what? A double crochet. And then we're looking at the bottom. We're seeing this loop here. So this loop here indicates where the stitch is going. Is it going in the front loop or is it going in the back loop? So when you see it swoop down like this, like a happy face, the happy face means front loop. The sad face means the back. So this is a double crochet going into the front loop only. Double crochet front loop only. Okay. Is this backwards? Yeah, I wrote some of these backwards because, you know, the Cameron things. Ready? What's this one? What stitch is this? Any ideas, guys? Any ideas? Any ideas? Woo! Mm-hmm. So if you guessed the star stitch or the 5-point Marguerite stitch, you are correct. Some reference books call it the Marguerite cluster stitch, Marguerite cluster star stitch, any combination of those words. So when you're building this stitch, the way you talk yourself through it depends on person to person. So some people call the chain 1 to lock the eye of the star. Some of us call it the chain 1 to lock space. Some of us call it the chain space. But when you work this stitch, remember that you have 5 different places that you need to place your loops. So that's what differentiates this from the other Marguerite stitch, which is a 3-point Marguerite stitch. Okay. Jessica says, The dead spider is the best answer. I love that. So good. Okay. All right, what is this one, guys? And it's very specific. So it's an upside down teardrop. The upside down teardrop is what? It's very specific. Jeannie says light bulb. No, it's not a light bulb. So I'll give it another second or two. Okay, we have a start, we have a chain, we have surface crochet, a speech bubble. Okay, so now this here is surface crochet. You would typically see this on top of your pattern. So, or you'll see your pattern like grayed out, and then you'll see this in bold over top of your pattern on like a separate page. So surface crochet. I'll do just a couple more and then we'll move on. By the way, this is the 3-point Marguerite stitch. Okay, 3-point Marguerite. And this is going to be a 2 for a question. So this is a treble crochet, but why is it a treble crochet? Like, why is this symbol a treble crochet? There's a very specific answer. I mentioned this a few times now. When you look at these stitches, the strike marks indicate what? These are strike marks. Why do we have 2 strike marks there? Yep. So if you answer 2 yarn overs, that's correct. So if you don't eat, and this is like a fail safe, guys, when you look at these stitches, some of these strike marks, you'll see like 5, 4, 6 strike marks. You may not know the name of the stitch, but at least you know that these are strike marks and those indicate your yarn overs. All you have to do is count those strike marks and you'll know how many times you need to yarn over to do the stitch. It's always going to be pull through 2, pull through 2, pull through 2, but you need to know how many times to yarn over at the beginning. So yeah, you begin with this right here is your initial loop on the hook. You yarn over twice for a treble crochet. It's because you have 3 loops on your hook, which is why, 1, 2, 3, 3 is a treble, but your strike marks indicate how many times you need to yarn over to begin executing that stitch. Okay, so I had some other stitches here, but I can't seem to find them. I had ones with a whole bunch of strike marks. I just wanted to show you. Before I pack this away, can anyone tell me what stitch this is? What stitch is this? Paula is asking, what is surface crochet? Surface crochet is when you crochet on top of your work. So let's say you do a whole swatch of single crochets. You'll then take another color of yarn, or maybe the same yarn, and you will insert your hook on the top of your work and pull the yarn up from the back, and you'll create a bunch of slip knots. And then you'll follow the direction that your pattern is telling you to go. If you answered shell, correct. Yes. All right. Very, very good. Now, I've done some homework, guys. Okay, we're going to go through this. We're going to talk about all of this. But before we get into this, I want to show some of our newbies the labels. So first, the only weight of yarn that I do not have is a 2-weight yarn or a number 7. But I will show you what I do have. So this is a super bulky number 6 weight yarn. Super bulky number 6. And on every skein of yarn that's pretty close to like now, vintage yarns are different, but you'll find all of this information around the barcode, which is right there. This has a lot of important information on here that I feel like a lot of us sometimes misunderstand, right? So when we look at this, what are the symbols do not bleach? What does that look like? What are the symbols hand wash, lay flat to dry? Like a lot of times, some of our decisions in purchasing yarn or choosing yarn for a project ultimately decides on how we take care of the yarn. Are we going to make a hand wash lay flat to dry king size blanket? I don't know about you, but that's not something that I want to make. So, you have to choose the right yarn if you want to make something huge like that, right? And then the opposite is true. Like if you have something really delicate that you want to make for a very special occasion, should it strictly be machine washable and dryable, or can you make it in a delicate fiber? You can. So that's kind of why it's very important to know like what is on this label. And there's many videos on the YouTube streets giving you the rundown on what this is. So I'm not going to get into like super deep detail about this. Feel free to look on the YouTube streets. But what I want to share with you here are these little squares right here. And I don't know if it's going to pick it up, but if you're looking at those little squares down there at the bottom, okay, this one right in the middle of those squares, that's pretty obvious. That's a picture of an iron with a strike mark over top of it. That means do not iron. But can anyone tell me what this black triangle is with the strike marks over it? Can anyone tell me what that one there is? What this one right here is, and what this one right here is. What are those two? Any ideas? So, okay, yep, I'm seeing it. So one of the signs is do not bleach, and the other one is do not dry clean. So the do not bleach is this one right here. The dry clean is this one right here. The middle one is do not iron. And then, hold on. It shows up opposite for me. These two right here, it's machine washable and dryable. That's the wash, that's the dry. Okay. So anyway, I wanted to show you guys that because for the longest time, I would look at these and be like, I don't even know what that is, but it doesn't apply to me, so it doesn't matter. But it really does matter. Like, what happens if you add bleach to yarn? Has anyone did that? Has anyone done that? Accidentally add bleach to iron? I mean, add bleach to yarn? I've done that by accident. I accidentally went like this to the bleach with a crochetable item years ago. Ever happen to anybody? I gotta tell you. So, okay. The chemical in bleach is a very strong chemical. Okay. And yarn is very fickle, Not only did it eat at the color, but it also broke down the fibers and made it very brittle. Bleach is like, it's very powerful when it comes to yarn, more specifically synthetic fibers. Natural fibers can handle a little more when it comes to the bleach. You still damage it, but synthetic fibers really take a beating with bleach, especially synthetic fibers that have been processed heavily. Like, it was a red make that I threw in the washer, and the label didn't read it, but it had do not bleach. And I poured bleach into the washing machine. And seconds after I did that, I immediately noticed that the color was starting to like lighten. It was starting to lighten up. So I pulled it out of the washer. From the time it took me to get from the laundry room to the kitchen to kind of rinse this off, it was already changing color. And as I was squeezing it and trying to do this to it, it was tearing. The yarn was tearing. So just be very careful. Read those labels. Try to understand all parts of the label before embarking on huge projects, because it's an investment, right? When you make something huge, you're spending quite a bit of money on yarn, or if you're not money, just material. You're using a lot of material for a huge project. So don't waste your time with something that you don't fully understand. So take the time to get to know your material. All right. The other thing to look out for is Red Heart Super Saver is notorious for having no dye lot. Does anyone know what no dye lot means? No dye lot. Any ideas on what no dye lot means? Oh, thank you, Shay. I appreciate you. Huge hugs. So, thank you. No dye lot means there's supposed to be no variation within the color. You should be able to pick up the this orange in January, and then pick up that same color in June, and still be able to work the same project with no variation to the color. Okay. Allegedly, that's what should happen. I can tell you from personal experience, and many of you guys watching, just because it says no dye lot does not mean there won't be variations in the color. That's just simple fact. So I would strongly encourage that you have enough yarn for the project that you're working on before you start. How many times have I shown my red raglan? I thought it was going to be good, and it turned out to not be good because the dye lot was off. Now, did the label say no dye lot? It didn't say that. This has a dye lot, but I've had projects where it said no dye lot, and there was a variation in the color. It was slight. It was a very slight color change. However, there was a change. And so, yeah, always make sure you have enough yarn for your project before you start. And most skeins will tell you that. It says buy enough of the same dye lot to complete your project. It says it right here. You see it? So this is a DK weight yarn, by the way. I brought different yarn weights to show you. So this here is a 1 weight yarn. This is a 1 weight. And you can see it right there on the ball band. No, this side. It's a 1 weight. And they suggest for a 1 weight yarn a 3.25 millimeter crochet hook, and that's not standard. So like different size of hooks for different yarns. So just because this says it's a 3.25 doesn't mean that the next 1 weight yarn will also be a 3.25. You always have to read the labels for the suggested hook size for the yarn of your choice. You hear me say that a lot in tutorials because it's a general reminder, guys, that when you're picking up your yarn, you should be looking at that to see what they're suggesting as a starting point. You don't have to use the hook size that they're suggesting, but that's kind of your gauge on like where your starting point should be. So for instance, this is telling me a 3.25. Would I automatically jump to this yarn and use a 6 millimeter hook? No. I mean, unless you want to make like Charlotte's Web. But if you're trying to make something of substance, you start here and then you adjust after that. So this one here is a light DK weight yarn. Most DK weight yarns have a 4 to a 5 millimeter hook suggestion. Very rarely do I ever see anything outside of those parameters. So when you pick up a DK weight yarn, just look at the ball band. Like this one here has a 4. It says it right here, a 4 millimeter US letter G crochet hook. Lion Brand Mandala cakes have a 5 millimeter US letter H suggestion. So yeah. What else? I have a medium 4 weight yarn here. And as you can see here, they're suggesting a 5 millimeter US letter H crochet hook here. A 5 is a really decent size for this yarn, but I got to tell you, you can use a 5.5, you can use a 6. And the other thing about this is, let's see here. Right, let's go to right here. It says, do not tumble dry, dry flat. Okay, so you have machine washable, low iron, do not bleach, do not tumble dry, and then dry flat. Well, I will tell you firsthand that you can dry big twist on low heat. I said what I said. I don't typically dry my my makes, I always lay flat to dry anyway. But if you need to have this in the dryer to get it dry for whatever reason, maybe you're in a hurry, low heat, it will work just fine. It's not going to break it down. It's not going to do anything horrible to it. Many people have reviewed this about this yarn, and you can put it in the dryer on low heat. Probably a dumb question, but why does Red Heart recommend a 5.5 hook mostly? It's because that's what they're suggesting based on the reps per inch. So you have this gauge that you wrap your yarn around, and it's got so many reps per inch. And based on those reps, the recommended hook size is dependent upon how many reps. So your thinner 4-weight yarns, you'll get like a 5.0 US letter H. The medium-sized 4-weight yarns, it'll be a 5.5. And some 4-weight yarns, believe it or not, the thicker end of the 4-weight yarns will recommend like a 5.5 or a 6 millimeter US letter J hook. So, yeah. And by the way, if I haven't mentioned this already, I always forget this. We have international viewers. Everything that I discuss here is automatically assumed to be in US terms. So if there's any disconnect there, please let me fill you in on that. It's all US terms. So this here is let me go to this, a bulky number 5. And they're suggesting an 8 millimeter US letter L crochet hook. So most bulky 5-weight yarns come with a 6.0 to a 6.5 millimeter US letter K. So like a J or a K. Sometimes you will get a bulky 5-weight yarn with an 8 millimeter US letter L hook recommendation. And usually that's because of the way that the yarn was constructed. It was meant to not be tight, because the tighter that this yarn is, the more stiff and rigid it becomes. So that's why sometimes you will see like a weird hook size for a yarn. That's literally because they've had people test the yarn like this. They've had it tested, and if they go with what their traditional size was, and it's really hard and rigid and not comfortable for your hands or anything, they will hook up or needle up to a larger size to give you some of that looseness and that flexibility within the fabric you're trying to create. So, yeah. Well, the blooming usually happens with natural fibers, not necessarily acrylic. This here is 100% acrylic, so not with this. You really don't get blooming with acrylic. It's mostly natural fibers that you would see that. But yes, that's a great reason on why you will see a thin yarn with a very thick hook suggestion. And one classic example of that would actually be the Woolies worsted weight yarn, or the Woolies DK. If you look at that ball band, they suggest a larger hook than what you normally would use for that yarn. And that's because the wool that's in that yarn will bloom. So when you're crocheting with it, it's going to be loose and lacy and all the things. But the minute it hits water and soap and all the things, it's going to bloom and it's going to thicken up. And you're going to be like, thank goodness I used a thicker hook for this project. Okay. Let's say, isn't that a 7 hook, not the 7? Is that the 4.5 US number 7? So we have that one weird size in between the G and the H, which is a 4.5. And since we can't assign a letter to it, they gave it the number. And so they just assigned the same number that the knitters would use for a 4.5, which is a number 7. Yep. So those are the weight sizes there that I have here. I'm only missing a 7 weight, like a jumbo 7 is what they call it, a jumbo 7. And a sport weight. I have hanks of sport weight, but it was really hard for me to like pull it, cake it in time. So anyway, there's that. Let me take a quick break and sip on the coffee. Okay. Blooming means the fibers come out and washing and fill out the stitches. Yes, cashmere is a great example. You knit a larger gauge. When you wash it, it fills in with the, and you know what, Heather, you're exactly right. When people knit or crochet with natural fibers that will bloom, people new to those types of fibers will not feel comfortable at first working with that yarn because it's going to feel super lacy. It's going to feel very holey. It's not going to feel right like your traditional weights of yarns. But the minute it hits water, the minute it goes through that whole cycle of washing and, you know, you're laying it flat and you're rolling it into a towel and all the things, everything will fill out. And then you're going to say to yourself, thank goodness that I followed the suggested hook size and that I did not hook down, because what will happen with those types of fibers, I mean, it's going to clump together and it's going to look very matted, and you're not going to have your stitch definition. It's going to felt. It's just going to do all the things that you don't want it to do. So when working with natural fibers, really pay attention to the hook size suggestions. It's very, very important that you do that because, you know, they take all of those things into consideration. So, all right, let's jump into these diagrams. I went ahead and made some for us to, you know, supersize so we can see all the things. So for those of you guys that don't know what this is called a diagram. Felt is when your fibers lock in together, your yarn becomes one solid fabric. You no longer see your strands of yarn. They all interlock and become like one piece of fabric. Yep. Okay, so this is called a diagram. Okay, and let me just show you a few things here. First, you have your black triangle and you have your white triangle. Okay, you have your stop and your start. Okay, so right here is where you start, right here is where you stop. Okay, and a couple things to break down here. Let's look at the stitches. What kinds of stitches do we have here? What are we looking at? So we're looking at some chain stitches here across the bottom. These are chain stitches. And then just above that, I mean, we've covered this all in those cards, right? So we've got single crochet stitches right here. We've got more chains. We've got double crochet stitches, right? And I think that wraps up all the stitches that we're seeing here, right? This was the absolute clearest way that I could get this on here and show you guys. Couple things that I need to unpack. All right. I mentioned before that I would not suggest or say something that I haven't checked my resources on. So there was a question yesterday or the day before where someone said, why do we have to chain 3 and it equal a stitch versus not counting as a stitch? Like, if I don't want the stitch to count as a stitch, how many chains? It was this whole thing. Here it is. So if you notice, this is a row of double crochet stitches right here. And if you're noticing on this, you have a chain 3. Why is the chain 3 here? It's because it's counted as a stitch, and a chain 3 is equal to the height of a double crochet. And I know you all heard me say that before. So here is a classic example of why I said that, because in these diagrams that you're reading, you will see when a stitch is counted, if a chain is counted as a stitch, it's always going to be equal to the height of a stitch. And double crochet stitches have 3 chains, which is what you're seeing there. Now here, if you look at this end, this is a half double crochet. And if you look at the other end of this line, you see 2 chains. 2 chains equals the height of a half double crochet. Okay, so that's how you know that this particular pattern is balanced. Now, one of the things you should be looking for when you're looking at diagrams is how many chains are on the ends of your stitches. So if the beginning has a double crochet and your chains are counted as a stitch, it should have 3. But if it has 2, then you already know something is wrong with this pattern. It should always be even. What happens on one side has to balance out on the other side, which is kind of how you're seeing it like this, where you've got the chain 3 and the double crochet. the chain 2 and the half double crochet, and so on for each row. Okay. Now, if you are not wanting your chains to count as a stitch, okay, if you're not wanting it to count, so what you would traditionally do is reduce your chain count by 1, cut it back by 1. So if you're doing double crochet stitches, you would cut it down to 2 chains, and then you would place a double crochet right above this stitch right here. And I have a diagram example of that where you're not counting the chain as a stitch. And let me just show this to you. Hold on. If you look, you see how your double crochets are not 3 chains on the end, but they're 2. And that's because you reduce the chain count by 1 and you're placing a stitch right above the very last stitch of the previous row. Okay? So that's the clear difference between counting your chains as a stitch versus not counting your chains as a stitch. Hopefully, the visuals give you a clear indication of what I'm trying to explain, but there it is. Okay? So always pay attention to your chains at the beginning and end of your rows. Make sure you understand that if your stitch or if your chains are not being counted as a stitch, make sure you're chaining the correct amount of chains. And if you're chaining too many, the ends will wave. If you're not chaining enough, it's just going to look cattywampus. It's going to take on a new shape. But which way makes your sides all the same and not wobbly? Well, if you're paying attention to your actual chain counts, it will stay the same. Be consistent. So whichever way you choose, stick to it. Don't change up, because the minute you change up, the shape is gone. So if you go with this and you chain 2 and you go right into that very first stitch, you chain 2, go right in, make sure you stay consistent with that. Because if you go from this to this, your edges are now not going to be straight. So if you look at this, at the end of the row here, we're chaining 3 and we're going into the second stitch. See how this double crochet is not being placed in the first one here? It's going right into the second one, all the way down to the end. So you'll hear me say this a lot when we count chains as stitches. Go into the top chain. You'll hear me say that a lot. Go into the top chain. That's what you're doing right here. You're going into the top chain to make your last stitch, and then you're chaining 3 and going into the second stitch. Okay, and that's pretty universal. So regardless of your project, guys, pay attention to the ends of your rows. Are these chains being counted as a stitch? Yes? Okay. What's the stitch? How many chains? So once you start getting all of those pieces, all of that will lay all into place. It's all going to make sense. And then you'll be able to catch those patterns that are wrong. So for instance, if you have a row of double crochet stitches, right? And let's say they say, okay, yes, the chains are being counted as a stitch, but only chain 2. Well, we already know that that's not right. We already know that if we're chaining 2 and that chain 2 is being counted as a stitch, it can't count as a stitch because 3 chains equal the height of a double crochet. So you mean to tell me the very first stitch of every row is going to be shorter than the rest of the row? Will my project lay flat? Will it like buckle? Of course, it's going to do all the wrong things. So, and let's see, Paula is asking, do you read left to right or right to left? And so it ultimately determines, it depends on whether you're a right-hand crocheter or left. So regardless of where your starting point is, you start here. And by the way, this is created for a right-handed crocheter. So, because the vast majority of you guys are right-handed crocheters. So let's do this one. So we start here and we're going all the way down and then we chain 2 and go right into that first stitch, and then go all the way down, chain 2, go into the first stitch. We're not skipping any stitches. Those chains just elevate us to the round. They're like little elevators. That's what these are. When they're not being counted as a stitch, they're elevator chains. That's it. Super, super nice. So you're very, very welcome. Hopefully you guys maybe, listen, if you picked up one little thing from our little session today, then it was a win-win for both of us. That's kind of the reason why I do these. I try to highlight different things each time we meet, and today was no different. So the one final thing that I wanted to share with you guys is when you see diagrams that only give you a slice of the pie. So for instance, maybe you have a circular pattern. Most circular patterns will not come to you as a full circle, especially if there's a repeat. So what happens is they'll give you a slice of the pie and then tell you to continue repeating until you get back to the beginning again. And this is what it looks like. Okay, so this is a classic example of a pie slice pattern, like a pie slice diagram. So this is what it looks like. And what you want to do is look at the center here. Clearly, this is a circular pattern. So traditionally, your pattern will start in the beginning. For those of us who are learning how to read diagrams, please don't get misconstrued. There will be a lot of misinformation out there. Here's an example. Where are my chains? Where's my magic circle? So you're not seeing any of that there. So what is that telling me? That's letting me know that whoever looks at this, one should automatically assume that you know that you're supposed to start with some sort of circle, whether that be a slip stitch circle or a chain circle or a magic circle, a circle of whatever of your choosing. And then from there, you begin with a chain 3. And this is for right-handed crocheters. So from here, you're going to come down with all your double crochets. And then if you see there's a black dot there, there's a black dot after every round. That means that you're supposed to slip to the top chain before the next stitch. Okay. So lots of chain work here. We're building Charlotte's Web, so to speak. So for round number 1, you've got a bunch of double crochets, okay? For round number 2, so you're slipping and then you're chaining 3. And then for round number 2, it's telling you chain 1, skip 1, double crochet in the next. Actually, no, it's not telling you that. It's saying chain 1, double crochet right into the next stitch. Double crochet, or chain 1, double crochet in the next stitch. So you're not skipping stitches for this one. Sorry about that. You're not skipping any stitches, but you're putting a chain 1 in between all of your stitches. It's weird looking through the paper. And so you're just adding 1 chain per round is kind of what you're seeing here. Okay. But I challenge you guys to go out there and look at a diagram and ask yourself these same questions. Like, if the row is a double crochet, how many chains do they have at the end? Are they counting it as a stitch? If they are, do they have the right amount of stitches? Do you see a beginning? Do you see an end? You should be looking for these things when you're looking at diagrams. You should find that, and you should find this up here. Where does it start? Where does it end? Okay. So hopefully this helped. 1, I always chain 2 when doing a double crochet row. If I chain 3, my sides are always not straight. So when you chain 3, you should always be skipping the first stitch. If you're chaining 3 and going into that first stitch, your sides will be cattywampus. You have to skip the first stitch to keep it straight. If you reduce your chain by 1, then yes, you can go into that first stitch and it will remain straight. Believe it or not, when my mom crocheted, she preferred not skipping any of the stitches. She'd rather just chain 2 and go right into that first stitch each and every time. Because for her, and it makes sense, there's no holes, there's no gaps. You know, even if you're counting chains as stitches, there's still like a little bit of a gap there. But it's preference, you know. There's no right or wrong way for that decision. But make sure that whenever you decide to do that, well, hopefully at the beginning, when you make that decision, hopefully you stick with it the entire time from beginning to end. Okay. Hi, Kendall. Welcome in. Anybody have any questions? Thank you all for being here today. I really appreciate you guys. Let's see. Juan, please speak on the edging. So as I mentioned before, when you're crocheting, you should be reading your work. And what does that mean, reading your work? So take a break every few rows and look at your edges, okay? Sometimes we forget to skip a stitch. Maybe that's something that the pattern has or something we chose. You know, we chain 3, which is the height of the double crochet stitch, and then we skip the first one. We go into the second one because we're counting that chain 3 as a stitch. Sometimes we forget, you know, and it causes our work to go like this. Or in some cases like this, right? We change up. Just be consistent. And when you look at your edging, you should see like a pattern. It should be like, okay, if you chain 2 and you're going into the first stitch, you'll have a little bump there. It's okay to have the bump there, but it needs to be every row with a bump so that when you're looking at the overall picture of your work, the scope of your work, it balances out. It makes sense, you know? Let's see. Should you bleach white acrylic yarn or will it fall apart? The bleach will actually eat away at the fibers. You should not be bleaching your yarn. I mean, not chlorine bleach anyway. I don't know of a yarn that says it's okay to bleach unless it's cotton. I know I personally have dyed cotton yarn before with bleach, but cotton is strong enough to withstand bleach, you know? Yeah. Thoughts on starting a row with a stacked single? Stacked singles are great. They keep straight edges as well. If that's something that you decide to do, just be consistent with it, because the minute you change that process, your edges will change shape. Even if you're counting your chain 3 as a stitch, the edges will not be consistently the same. So it's a huge thing, guys. Stack singles, chain stitches, counted as stitches, and otherwise, just be consistent. That's like the biggest thing that I could preach about this, especially when it comes to managing your edges and making sure that your edges stay straight. The key to keeping straight edges is to be consistent with your stitches. Okay. What about Woolite? I've never tried Woolite. I can't really speak on it. I do know that non-chlorine bleach works fine. So Clorox 2 for colors. I've used Clorox 2 for colors, and that has worked, but that's just for my own personal makes. I'm not going to sit here and say, go ahead and use it. Use it at your own risk. Let's see. Any other questions? Do you yarn over or yarn under, and what's the difference? So that's a very good question, because depending on the stitch, like a lot of times I will yarn over, I'll go into the stitch and I'll pull the stitch through. I won't yarn over when I pull in. Like when I go into a stitch and draw the loop through, sometimes you will see crocheters go into the stitch and draw the loop with a yarn over. I don't do that. I actually just pull it through as a yarn under. And for me, it allows me to keep my stitches tighter. It's just a preference. There is no right or wrong way, as long as you get to the end goal all the same. So when I do my tutorials, you will always hear me draw a loop. You will never hear me say, pull the loop through or insert your hook, yarn over and pull through. Sometimes you'll hear me say that, but like in most cases, it'll be insert your hook and draw the loop. And however you draw your loop is fine. Just be consistent with it. Let's see here. Do you know about mosaic and or tapestry crochet too? Mosaic, yes. Tapestry, no. That was my aunt and my grandmother. I've done work with an Afghan hook, and I've done color work using like little boards. I don't know what they're called nowadays, but back in my day, we cut pieces of cardboard and wrapped yarn around pieces of cardboard, and I used an Afghan hook to change colors when I, forward pass, return pass, and all the things. I believe it's called intarsia. It's called intarsia, but no, not tapestry. Let's see. Are there different kinds of hooks for different kinds of crochet? Yeah, there's Afghan hooks, Tunisian crochet hooks. There's inline crochet hooks. There's tapered, which we all know about. But then there's also these little itty bitty crochet hooks that knitters use to help fix their stitches when they get lost in the rows. They're usually held on a little key ring, and they've got like 3 little half crochet hooks. It's really neat to look at. So awesome. Let's see. I'm talking about when you get to the edging. Do we go into the chain too, or the stitch next to it? Well, yes, I spoke about that. So when you're chaining 3 and turning your work, you're not going into the chains. You're skipping a stitch. It's shown right here. So when you chain 3 at the end of your row to go up, you're going into the next stitch. But when at the end of your row, yes, you're going into the top chain. You're inserting your hook into the top chain and then doing your stitch and then going across. And you're going to do that each and every time. Yep. Let's see. Double-sided hooks. Yes, there are double-sided hooks, and I have them, but I haven't really felt a need to use them. One of the little crochet hooks is what your Lefty Frog Prince is holding. Yes. Yes. Absolutely. Will I do Tunisian tutorials? Probably not, Norma. There's just not enough of an interest, to be perfectly honest with you. It's such a small niche. There are many people who do it, but I also feel like there's great resources out there that cover it already. If I do anything like that, it's entrelac, and I've done that already on the channel. I have tutorials out there for entrelac crochet in the round. So if you want to check that out, by all means, go and do that. That's Tunisian crochet, but with a crochet hook. Yep. Hi, Debbie. Welcome in. Let's see. No, when we put the border around the piece. So yes, when you're putting a border around your work, very good question there. When you're putting a border around your work, there's specific numbers of stitches that should go on the side of your work. So the amount of stitches would depend on the height of your actual stitch. Okay. And so traditionally, if you are working a single crochet back and forth and you need to put an edge around it, every row gets 1 stitch at the end. So 1 stitch, 1 stitch, 1 stitch. If it's double crochet, it's 2 stitches per row. 2, 2, and 2. When you do that, you're creating a nice even border, and you want to make sure that you're hugging the appropriate stitches and or chains. So let's say you're working a project up, right? And your project has chains counted as stitches. That means that every other row you are crocheting stitches around your chains and not this. You're crocheting around this only. Just that. If you're putting an edging on a project like this, you need to make sure that every other row, not only are you hugging around a stitch, but you're also hugging around a chain stitch as well, a bunch of chains. So here you're doing 2 stitches around this row, 2 stitches around this row, but you're also picking up the 2 chains there, so on and so forth. And when you do that, and let me just go ahead and cover it up. If you cover all of this with your stitch, you're left with a straight border. Like, your work will be straight. You need to make sure that you're covering the correct things. So you go from this to this. And all of that is covered up. Okay? So, yeah. That was a very good question there, Sapphire. I appreciate you asking that. Do I know nooking? I am familiar with it. Yes. There's a lot of things that I do off camera that I don't present because I feel like I'm not strong enough in it to present. I feel one should be well versed in the craft that they're presenting before actually doing that. And nooking for me is just something I play around with. I'm not an expert on it or anything. So just something I do off camera to play around with. Let's see. Debbie says, I'm going to start a folder to save these for quick access to watch again. Thank you, Debbie. I appreciate that. I really do. Is there a way to correct end stitches? I am new to stitching and finished making a wallet, and it's so beautiful, but the whole ends are so uneven. Do you video how to add stitches to fill in? So to do increases and decreases, I do live tutorials for things like that. I do that on another platform called TikTok. So I will sit at the tutorial table and I will have at-length discussions with the viewers about things like that, because I feel like with makes where it involves increasing and decreasing, it's a conversation that needs to be had to fully understand it. Of course, we can make tutorials, but with things like that and many other things, people will have questions. You know, you're going to walk away looking at it and be like, okay, I get what he means, but what about this? What about that? So that's why I do those types of tutorials live. And it's a really great way to interact with the crocheters and help them understand what it is that I'm trying to show them. And do I have all the answers? No, but I try. Let's see. Can you do a video on the half double in your Stitch Academy? I know it's a simple stitch, but I messed up on a sweater I was trying to make. Should I try to use stitch markers? I will, yes. And Lollipop, there have been many people asking me for basic stitches. I do know that I had a video up where I did all of the foundational stitches, the stabilizing stitches. I took it down because it was one of the earlier tutorials that I did. And in the video, I was calling crochet hooks needles. My vernacular wasn't where it needed to be to do that kind of a tutorial. So I will be doing another one. And I will be sure to give you guys those stitches for the Stitch Academy. I'll do it separate as well. Like, it's going to be very basic. Here's a double crochet. Here's a herringbone half double crochet. Here's a double. Here's a triple. Here's a single. Yeah, we'll do all that. Let's see. So you've showed the charts here. Have you read the mosaic charts? What makes them different? The process is exactly the same. Once you understand what the legend provides, you read the directions exactly the same. You look at your pattern, you see what each part of the pattern is trying to tell you what it is, and then you go from there. It's really, really easy. You're very, very welcome, Susan. I'm so glad that some of this was of help to you guys. Is the name still the same on TikTok? Yes, it is. You can find me on TikTok at Juan the Yarn Addict at TikTok. And my usual live times are Fridays at 9, usually. But if you follow me over there, have the notifications turned on so you know when I'm going live. And yeah, just pop on over and hang out. And I do play my music. So if you're okay with that being in the background, then it'll be a good time. Let's see. Thank you. Thank you from Southwest Florida. Absolutely. You're very, very welcome. Yep. And by the way, guys, if you ever have any questions, you guys know where to send them to. Kim has been peppering it into the chat. I will use your questions as talking points for Whipping It with Wands. I'll use it for the next Let's Chat Stitches. All questions are good questions, guys. There is no question that's off the table here when it comes to crochet. If it has anything to do with crochet, anything to do with knitting or fiber arts, send it our way. We'll find answers for you and we'll get to the bottom of it, okay? So I am actually going to wrap up our session today, our little Let's Chat Stitches. Hopefully you learned one little thing from today's session. I hope so. I had a really good time presenting all of this to you. And until the next one, guys, you have a wonderful, wonderful Tuesday. Take care, guys. Bye.